Beau is Afraid is directed by Ari Aster. This is his third feature film. His first film, Hereditary, is one of my favorite movies of all time. I think it's one of the best directorial debuts that's ever been done. It's one of the scariest movies I've ever seen. Midsommar, I didn't love it nearly as much, but it was still, I think, a very effective and great kind of scary movie. I don't think Midsommar is like terrifying, but there are moments where you get weirded out but kind of scared at the same time. Midsommar is still overall a really great movie, so I was very curious to see what he would do with Beau is Afraid. The trailer looked very interesting, like nothing he's ever done before with his first two films, but it really almost felt like kind of like a culmination of what he's been doing. Felt like to me it was kind of building up to this. It felt like he has truly been able to unlock what he wants to do with filmmaking. This is a movie for sure. I've never seen a movie like this. It is an experience that you will never forget. No matter how you feel about this movie, I feel like you will remember watching this movie. And everyone's going to have a different experience with this film. I saw this in actually a decently kind of packed theater. It was a small theater and the first showing, so there was a good amount of people there for me to feel out how people felt. I went with two friends, and one person to my left wasn't someone that was part of my group. Everyone was to my right. The person to my left, once this ended, actually said something to me, which is not something that normally happens to me at the theater. He said to me something along the lines of, like, these filmmakers think they know what they're doing, but that was, like, trash. And then I turned to my friend on the right, and his jaw is dropped to the floor because he was just so mesmerized by this film. I was just kind of nervously laughing like that and reflecting on the movie. I don't think this is better than Hereditary. I think this is among the same lines as Midsommar, but I find myself a little bit more fascinated with this movie because this movie has a lot it wants to do, but it also makes me want to watch the director's cut to Midsommar more, because I've only seen the theatrical cut and I know the director's cut's like an hour longer, but this movie is 3 hours and I really did not know what to think of that runtime. I was like, is this going to be pretentious or is it going to actually feel earned? For the most part, it felt earned. I did not feel the runtime to this movie as much as I thought I would. I did not feel the runtime until the last 20 minutes of this movie. And in all honesty, the last 20 minutes of this movie is where all my problems lie. I know a lot of people, when I film, a lot of people have issues with the last two acts. I didn't have that issue. I thought the first two acts were great, and a lot of the third act was great as well. It's just once you hit a certain beat, you really don't know where the movie's going to go, and it pulls out some things out of pocket that feel a little strange, and the movie gets a little too weird for me at one point. When I say too weird, I genuinely mean too weird, because I feel like there was something that Ari Aster was going for, and I felt like it could have been done but less weird, because at one point it felt like they were just thinking to themselves, okay, what's the weirdest thing possible that we can do to weird out the audience? And it's just one big choice towards the end that just didn't necessarily stick the landing with me. Like, yes, they're trying to maybe do symbolism with it, but it's a little too crazy for me to say, you know what, that was 100% earned. I don't feel like they necessarily earned everything they tried to do in the last 20 minutes. But some other stuff in the last 20 minutes, particularly the last scene, I love what Ari Aster was trying to say. I think I completely saw what he was trying to say with that last and final scene. I just think maybe there was better ways to get there. That last 20 minutes, before that, I was like, okay, this movie's going to be ending soon. So we need to have an ending that really satisfies me, because this is a long journey that, admittedly, I've really enjoyed and did not feel the runtime at that point. And then we hit a certain mark. I don't know where the movie's going to go, and then I start to feel that runtime. So it's just the last 20 minutes I had issues with. The thing that's kind of frustrating about that is because it's the end of the movie. Everything has built up to this, and I don't necessarily know if every ounce was earned, but overall, I did enjoy the movie, and I like what they were trying to say with the ending. 20 minutes sounds like a lot, but when you think about the 3-hour movie, 2.5 hours at least, I was absolutely loving. I think this is probably visually and technically Ari Aster's best. This movie looks great. It's filmed really, really well. There's a lot of great shots here and there, particularly in the opening. There's a lot of very clever ways that they move the camera. I think they just dive into Beau in a very, pitch perfect way, perfect Ari Aster way. This movie wasn't particularly scary. It was just anxiety inducing. And that's what I really like about this movie, because Ari Aster understands that putting a character in a scary situation doesn't make the scene scary. You have to feel the anxiety of the characters. When you have anxiety-fueled fear in a scene, that's what makes me terrified of Hereditary, and what makes me believe Hereditary is the scariest movie ever made. And yes, I stand by that. And so when I watch this, I don't necessarily, there's nothing there that's really scaring me on screen that makes me go, I'm terrified. And the movie didn't do that once. I just felt this character's anxiety with the most basic things. I've never seen a movie do it like this before in such a well-realized way. Ari Aster just knows what he's doing, and Joaquin Phoenix is so good in this movie. I feel like a lot of the conversation is going to be covered up from Joaquin Phoenix because, this is Ari Aster's movie. This is his big conversation piece. This is his biggest budget. But you cannot doubt how good Joaquin Phoenix is in this movie, because there's a lot Joaquin Phoenix has to understand about this movie and Ari Aster personally to really get this performance this good. I think there's a lot of Ari Aster in this movie, in this personal life, and it is very fascinating. It makes you want to make sure he's okay and make sure he has a therapist. But it is overall, I think, a very, very solid next film of his. I did really enjoy this movie. The movie does something very interesting about halfway through the movie. I will just call it a psychological side quest. And it takes up maybe a solid 20-25 minutes of the movie, and then it ends, and I can see a lot of people thinking that it led to nothing and it meant nothing. I'm not going to say I 100% disagree with that, but I'm not going to lie when I say I didn't really enjoy it and thought it was one of the most visually interesting things I've seen in a horror film in quite a bit. It's a hard movie to talk about because there's so much there and a lot to unpack, but I like movies like that. I like movies where I have to think about it for a while. This movie has not left my brain since I've watched it. It has a lot of stuff it wants to say, and when I left the theater, I was like, how am I going to even unpack this? I've been able to slowly unpack it. There's a lot of stuff there that is unsettling, disturbing, and psychological, though. Nothing particularly scary. And it's going to have that audience divide, and people have been joking about it on Twitter. Yes, this will probably get an F cinema score. I will not be shocked by that whatsoever. But really enjoyed this movie. It's just that last 20 minutes has me scratching my head a little bit. I had a blast with this movie. The first chunk was also really, really good. Like the opening of the trailer, obviously, where you see Beau in his apartment and all that, is obviously the opening of the movie. And I think it's maybe the most enjoyable part of the movie as the movie slowly gets more depressing and more depressing as it goes. Yeah, I cannot remember the actress's name, but she plays Holly in The Office. She was great in the movie, and that section of the movie also was a huge highlight. There's just a lot of stuff there that will visually make your eyes pop. It'll make you sit back in your seat and go, what is happening right here? I want to keep on saying it's a lot of fun, but it's oddly weird to say that because there's a lot of comedy here as well, where my audience was like quite laughing. Most of the laughs were in the beginning of the movie, and then the more we got into the movie, I think some of the audience was getting a little over it. I consistently felt the audience getting over it as I was still really enjoying the movie, and then the last 20 minutes happened. I was like, okay, I'm not so sure, because it does a thing. I was like, okay, maybe you can end here, then it goes on for another 10 minutes. I'm like, okay, maybe you can end here, and it goes on for another 5 minutes. I was like, okay, please stop here, then it stops here. This movie, if it were any longer, I do think it would have suffered for it, and was still at the end of the day a really great movie that I had a complete blast with. It's just there's some stuff here that I tried to unpack, and I think I got a lot of it. It's just some of it just makes me question of, did it have to be that weird? Still a great psychological study on Joaquin Phoenix's Beau, whatever his last name was. Will be a movie that is discussed for a long time, and if it's controversial, that's good. I know Ari Aster's eating up the controversy, and if that's what he wanted, good for him. He said that this was the movie that he's most proud of, so that is all good for him. If he's happy with it, that's what matters, because it seems like an oddly personal project to him. But I'm going to give Beau is Afraid an 8.8 out of 10. 2.5 hours of this movie just flew by. Yes, that last 20 minutes kind of dragged. It's still overall a long movie that overall, in my eyes, did not drag at all until that last 20 minutes. And I think that's a very impressive thing to do for a movie that's concept that's just kind of thin, but has so much deeper layers to it. But those movies are usually the slow burns and are usually about 2 hours. No, this movie is 3 hours, but it embraces it in all the right ways and brings forth this, I think, a beautiful looking movie that kind of has its issues, but overall is still a movie that I will not forget anytime soon. So yeah, anyways, comment down below what you guys thought of Beau is Afraid. This should be a very interesting comment section this time around. So yeah, like, share, subscribe, and stuff like that, and adios.